Welcome back to this tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to talk about the different types of driver. So there are four types of driver: type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4. So type 1 driver is JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Type 2 driver is native API driver, or sometimes it may be called as a partially Java driver. Type 3 driver is a network protocol driver or middleware driver, or sometimes it may be termed as a full Java driver. Type 4 driver is database protocol driver, or it may be termed as a full, pure or 100% Java driver. So in this slide, I'm having a client computer or client machine with the database. So my Java application want to communicate with the database through the type 1 JDBC ODBC bridge driver. So I have written application code, and with the help of JDBC API I am trying to communicate with the type 1 driver, because I know that type 1 driver helps me to communicate from my Java application to the database. Okay, so now I'm having my application code. I have established a connection from my application code to the type 1 driver through the JDBC API. Okay, now in this case, my type 1 JDBC ODBC bridge driver alone cannot communicate with the database. I require something that helps me to the communicate. So there is a ODBC driver. So with the help of open database connectivity driver, I can communicate with the database. Now try to understand. Don't get confused with the type 1 JDBC ODBC driver and ODBC driver, because the keyword ODBC in the both side, but this type 1 JDBC ODBC bridge driver and ODBC driver both are totally different. Okay, so this type 1 JDBC ODBC bridge driver comes with your Java software. When you install your Java itself, type 1 driver comes in that installation. You don't need not to explicitly install type 1 driver, but this JDBC driver need to be installed separately. Okay, now we have having the hub connectivity. Still we required one component, that is database vendor libraries. So these database vendor libraries helps us to communicate from the Java application to the database. Now the communication is established, but you might have observed these two components are there, and why they are there. Okay, I'll explain you. So ODBC driver actually communicate with the database, and ODBC drivers are database dependent, or we could say that ODBC drivers need to be compatible with the database. Suppose I'm using the Oracle database, then I have to have Oracle driver which can be compatible with the Oracle database, otherwise communication cannot be take place. Similarly, we require the database vendor libraries in order to complete the communication from the Java application to the database. These database vendor libraries are also database dependent. Okay, if you are using Oracle, then these database vendor libraries should be from the Oracle only. So all these components are on the client machine. My Java application is on the client machine. Type 1 driver is also client on the client machine. JDBC driver is also on the client machine. Database vendor library is also on client machine, and even database also on the client machine. So this may be a one case, but database may resides on the remote place also. If it is remote place, we can still communicate with the database. There is no problem communicating the remote database. So we'll try to understand. So this is another snapshot which is actually giving the same scenario as we have seen the previous slide. In this case, we are having the calling Java application, which with the help of Jdbc API, we are actually communicating with the Jdbc ODBC bridge driver. Then there is a ODBC driver, database library APIs, okay, and with the help of all these components we are actually communicating to the database. So here in this case I want to clarify is that all these components resides on the client machine. Your application, your JDBC API, your JDBC ODBC bridge a driver, that is type 1 driver, your ODBC driver, your database library API is also on the your client machine. Or database may resides on the client machine or may not reside on the client machine. It's a totally depend on the kind of application you are building. Now this snapshot also saying the same thing we have seen. So here new thing is that we are having three different databases. Okay, so the question is over here is, can with the help of type 1 driver I could communicate with the different database? So answer is yes, I can. We could actually communicate to the different database at the same time using type 1 driver. But this ODBC driver must be compatible with the respective driver. For Oracle driver, we need a separate ODBC driver which is compatible with the Oracle only. SQL, for the SQL server from the Microsoft, we require ODBC driver which are compatible with the SQL server, and similarly for the Sybase also we require the compatible ODBC driver. Then and then communication take place and we could parallelly communicate to the different, or same time we could communicate with the different databases. So this flow is also similar to as we have seen. Java application is there. With the help of JDBC API we are communicating to the JDBC ODBC bridge driver, and in turns with the help of ODBC API we are communicating with the ODBC driver, and ODBC driver communicate with the database, and this is how the communication take place. Now we'll try to understand some points from the type 1 driver. So type 1 driver is provided by the Sun microsystem as an JDBC ODBC bridge driver, and it is in this form. Okay, so sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc ODBC driver. This is the name of type 1 driver. So try to understand over here is JDBC ODBC driver is a class name, that's why this J O and D are in uppercase, and this J O are in the lowercase. Why I'm telling, because so many times we commit the mistake of typing all this class name as an in the small case only. Okay, so this may create a problem in your application, so need to be considered. The second point is saying that all these drivers are written in the native code. Native code means to say written in the C or C++ language, but not exactly in the Java. And this native code is in a closed form. Okay, cannot be opened. Third point is saying that Oracle's JDBC ODBC bridge driver was removed in the Java 8. So if you having the Java 8 installed on your system, and if you're trying to use the type 1 driver, then type 1 driver are not compatible or not in not useful in the Java 8. They may be useful in the previous version of Java, but not Java 8. Next point is saying that the JDBC classes can be found in the Java package called java.sql and javax.sql. And the last point is saying it's very important. It's saying what the driver is platform dependent, because we know that ODBC driver we are having there. ODBC drivers are totally dependent on the kind of database we are using, and even these ODBC drivers are also dependent on the operating system also. So if you are having Windows operating system, then also the kind of ODBC driver will be differ from the other operating system. So this is how the type 1 driver is a platform dependent, not platform independent. So good thing is we should have the things in the platform independent form, but this type 1 driver is platform dependent. So we could conclude that this type 1 driver is a kind of having a drawback of platform dependency. So these are the some pros and cons of the type 1 driver. So once you have the data ODBC driver, advantage of having the ODBC driver is that once your system is having ODBC driver of particular database, then we can easily communicate with that particular database. As in the previous slide we have seen that we are having we communicated to the three different databases: Oracle, MySQL, so SQL Server, and Sybase. So we are having the ODBC drivers for all these three databases, so we could easily communicate it. So disadvantage point of view, this type 1 driver actually having the overhead. So why this overhead comes? Because of those two components, as we have discussed, that ODBC driver and database vendor library. ODBC driver and database vendor libraries actually increase the overhead. Because of these two components, the communication time to database is increased. Okay, then the second disadvantage is the ODBC driver need to be installed on the client machine. Already discussed, we have to separately install ODBC driver on the your system, that is client machine or your local computer. And this type 1 drivers are not suitable for the web application, they are suitable for the standalone application. So these are some pros and cons of type 1 driver. So we'll see a type 2 driver and its pros and cons and architecture in subsequent tutorial.